Throughout the 2010s, anime evolved a lot. Of course, you can say the same for the 2000s, the 90s, the 1960s. But the 2010s is the first time the global market has made a real impact, and whoa, look at me, I'm a global person. Now, if I wanted to pick which studio wins for most influence of the decade, it would definitely be a tie between Kyoto Animation and Studio Trigger. However, KyoAni doesn't have any relevance in today's video, so let's just stick to Trigger. Trigger was initially formed by a hefty chunk of former Gainax employees, while the other chunk of them went on to either retire, join Studio Khara, or engage in extreme scandals. Gainax initially started as just some university otaku that wanted to animate to the best of their artistic and financial abilities. That eventually led to them becoming known as the anime studio composed of anime fans. They created Gunbuster, Nadia, Evangelion, FLCL, and most important to Trigger, Gurren Lagann. But eventually that success led to heavier executive control of the work, which led to a majority of their talent leaving. For a good comparison of how drastically they lost their way, their most recent work was 5 years ago, and it was a magical girl anime meant as an advertisement for Subaru, the multi-billion-dollar car manufacturer. Trigger mostly consisted of creatives from the Gurren Lagann team and newer talent, the most important being Hiroyuki Imaishi, and for today's subject, Yo Yoshinari. In 2013, they released their Ultra Max breakthrough hit, Kill la Kill. And while it is the one show I point towards for getting me back into anime during high school, and I would love to discuss it, it's not an out there assumption that most of you are already at the very least aware of Kill la Kill. But earlier in 2013, Trigger released their second project, Little Witch Academia. This was a grand deal upon release because it showed that Trigger was a legitimate company before Kill la Kill came out. But something more important than that was the content of the film. It was only 26 minutes, but it continued the Gainax style of strategic mixing of comedic and serious animation, while also being accessible for all ages, rather than aiming for one square demographic like most anime in any decade does. Now, looking at Kill la Kill, it's obvious that all ages programming wasn't a key goal at Trigger, but it is something that clicked pretty well with Little Witch Academia. The best aspect of it coming from the lead character Akko, who was a hardworking, naive, and cute outsider that everyone wanted to root for due to her passion for magic. And everyone got the chance to, because a second film was crowdfunded on Kickstarter that was twice as long and introduced even more characters. Then jump forward 2 more years and we got a 2-core TV anime of Akko kicking reason to the curb and making the impossible possible. I absolutely adored the show, and someday I'll do a video on that since I've been telling myself for a while I'll branch into anime videos. But today we're gonna talk about the mediocre RPG that I actually really fucking loved on account of being an extreme Trigger shell.
A new opponent is ready to face you. Engage!
So typically anime games in the modern era come in 2 forms. If it's based on a slice of life show, you get a visual novel. If it's based on a show with any type of action, then you've got a fighter or hack and slash. There's obvious outliers like Gundam, SAO, and Fist of the North Star, but I doubt anyone wants me to explain the Shaman King Metroidvania to prove I'm aware of my extreme generalization. Little Witch Academia Chamber of Time was developed by A+ Games, who to my knowledge have only done this and the Kill la Kill Arena Fighter, which is a type of fighter that doesn't really vibe for me, so I have not tried it. Chamber of Time takes place in between episodes 7 and 8 of the anime, so the main characters are all introduced and familiar with each other, but any events past Pisces Sensei's wild adventure are not referenced here, which for the most part just means everyone still bullies Akko a lot when she's really just trying her best, okay?
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
There's a few special moves that reference later episodes, but being real, I doubt you'll be buying this if you're not a fan of the show or the films. As well as that, you really shouldn't try to play this before watching the show or movies, because the gameplay and main story are fairly mediocre, which means the actual driving force of the narrative is the character interactions and side quest situations. The writing team essentially just thought about any minor interaction from the show and showed way more of it. Scenes like Susie and Constanze watching movies together, Lotte having a continued relationship with Annabelle online, or Hannah having a crush on boy Amanda that sparked a lot of Buru images. It's not just main characters that get attention either, because there's even a hefty amount of side characters that get scenarios. Remember these 3 from the Broomstick Race episode? Chamber of Time gives them a backstory, characterizations, and quest lines to go through. Their story isn't particularly extraordinary, but it did at the very least keep me interested. What's most interesting about the quests revolving around the side characters is that they typically start with them bullying Akko, and then respect her slightly more by the end, but not too much. She's still gotta be a little bit of a loser. Many of the professors of Luna Nova and the Goblin faculty get to have side quests as well. Pisces Sensei gets to go on a wild midlife crisis acid trip, Ursula gets to continue being the worst secret hider, and Holbrook Sensei is Granny of the Year, and we finally learn about the shoe hat she had in episode 9, thank fucking god. This is exactly what I fucking wanted from this game. Yay! Side quests with more effort put into them typically involve the main cast from the show, such as Akko and Amanda's groups, or the teachers. I'd say Diana as well, but the only one I remember well actually centered more around Amanda. And that circles into an issue I have with the main story, and that's how the characters can't develop that much. The spot it takes place canonically means that the main cast can't develop any further than they were in episode 8, or interact with Akko differently. Akko can't naturally use magic, Susie's extremely aloof, and Diana's kind of a bitch to Akko. Susie and Akko's lack of development is woven into the plot pretty well by just letting Susie perform some fucking bonkers experiments, while Akko has to jump through a hefty horde of humorous hoops both in gameplay and story to cast any spells. Diana's the only girl that gets a big oof from me because I've already seen her and Akko act friendly towards each other, and it just leads me to cry for purely instinctual reasons with no basis in logic. All that happened in Diana's quest were revelations that were either somewhat obvious by that point or inconsequential. And to be fair to them, the reveals might have hit weaker for me since her side quest revolved around returning enemy drops that I didn't actually earn until post-game because I didn't put much experience points onto anyone's luck stat during the main story. I do get that it had to be this way timeline-wise. And actually one little snidbit of characterization came from one of Amanda's quests where she wanted to sneak into a museum with Diana. On one hand, this was one of the quests where the perspective coming solely from Akko annoyed me since we don't know what they were doing. However, it did strike my imagination a bit. As I think I've stated in a previous video, I enjoy having a few obscured events to ponder upon. The main storyline does at the very least have a couple of high points, and by that I do mean a few anime cutscenes sprinkled about, and yet again character interactions. But the main plot itself is kinda weak sauce. As I stated earlier, one of the main drawbacks to the story comes from the placement between early episodes. But when it specifically takes place is the first day of summer vacation, and on an infinite Groundhog Day loop. Akko has to clean the library, and by that I mean she falls asleep. So Latte and Susie start helping her, and then they find a hidden chamber that has the 3 S's. Super cool hideout, spooky clock, and secret door that leads to an ancient ruin. Of course, in typical Akko gang fashion, they fuck up literally everything and lock themselves in a loop without realizing it. And then subsequently getting Amanda, Constanza, Jasminka, and Diana stuck in there as well. Now the gang has to find a way to fix their predicament and find the 7 keys by strategically learning the ins and outs of the first day of summer vacation. However, the time loop is gameplay-wise a tad bit broken. If you perform something during one loop, it selectively decides if that opens up a thing on the next loop. You're walked through all the main quests pretty hand-holdingly by markers on the map in bright red that's hard to miss, while side quests are in green or green with a fade for those already complete. The quests are going to happen at specific parts of the day and are specified in your event list once you start them. My issue is that sometimes I felt as though the way to trigger more side quests showing up was inconsistent. Quests that involve any of the loopers make sense. They have knowledge of previous loops, and normally their later quests rely on completion of the previous ones. So yeah, that works. But there's some quests like Avery's or Pisces Sensei's that just decided, yeah, you can do this now, which is odd to me because there's other quests like Irene's that you can activate the moment side quests open up, but can't solve until you have a specific spell from the main quest. While I would prefer if all of them were presented to us before they're possible, similar to a Collectathon's level structure, it's more so that I just like it to be consistent. But really, it's not that big of an issue, because I forgive them after seeing Akko touch their hearts and or happy face from doing stupid antics. To easily explain the design of the gameplay, it's probably easiest to call it 1 part RPG, 1 part beat 'em up, 1 part visual novel, and then like 3 fucking parts Tulip. I spent a very long time trying to figure out the right comparison, and I'm pretty confident with this because well over 50% of this game is just
Akko, you dumb useless bitch. Bring me this extinct item. Yo, Akko, be at this place at this time.
look at me, Akko, I'm a goblin. Do my fucking laundry. To be fair, the running and waiting isn't near as bad as Tulip. Early on, you'll have the option to buy a teleportation potion that warps you to a few warp points scattered about the school, and I would fully recommend that you make activating them your first goal in the game. We can also minimize our wait time by just sleeping in Akko's bed, but we can only do 1, 3, or 6 hours, which in most instances is fine, but occasionally I do find myself waiting for 30 minutes to an hour of in-game time. You've got to decide on whether or not it's worth the warp to Akko's room to sleep and then travel back to the spot needed, completed, which a lot of times does not have a warp point. And typically it is worth it if you're on the hour and have a plentiful amount of teleportation potions. And actually, let's talk about potions. So story-wise, Akko isn't capable of casting any spells since it's the early part of the series. But oh fuck, the game can't function as a Maho shoujo game if the shoujo can't Maho, which is why Akko needs to make use of potions you can buy in the shops to get anything done. Besides the teleportation spell, they're all situational, which in most instances I'd complain, but given the type of narrative we have, I will excuse it. All the situational potions, you don't need more than 15 besides mending, which has one quest that needs 15 of them, so just bump that number to 30. Each potion gets added to the shop through each of the 7 parts of the main quest that I can get to, I guess, now. Once the game's truly started and everyone's in the time loop and becomes aware of it, we have to use some keys to explore the ruins. We got 2 types of keys, 7 major keys for main story dungeons and 49 minor keys. You gain most of the minor keys through subquests and all of the major keys through main quests. Main quests end up pretty formulaic. First we do the first main dungeon, then we have an option to aim for 3 different goals. Each of those goals have 2 corresponding keys attached and a spell potion attached to each quest. Our driving force is mainly to use the potions we gain on side quests that need them and to see the funny animated cutscenes Trigger made for us, thank you. Obviously they're not as high quality as the show or films, but I've still got funny Akko antics, which is enough to tide my yearnings. Entering the dungeons themselves, we shift to a mix between a beat 'em up and RPG. We take 3 girls in at a time with extra party benefits added depending on who you picked. Everyone's got a light, medium, heavy attack like Marvel 3, and we can put 6 spells onto each character before entering a dungeon. At the start of the game, you'll have all the girls with the same few spells, but as you go on, it somewhat guides you in the right direction to take each girl by giving their character exclusive attacks, base stats, and basic attack types. And actually their base stats are fun to me because of how they match each character's personality. Amanda has ridiculous strength, Diana has the most MP, Akko has such a low starting intelligence that she couldn't fucking cast any spells for a bit, and Jasmika just does not die. During the main campaign, I found myself coming back to Constanze a lot because she's fast as shit and her normals are pretty varied. Post game, I ended up using Latte since she had the best luck stat and all the quests I had left were item grinds. Every time you level up, you get 4 points that you can put into your stat of choice. Mostly I'd put in on a character's best stat, but some I'd need to equal out on their worst stat to make sure they're playable. I stress again, Akko literally could not cast any spells when I upgraded my spells and not her intelligence. Back to the story, all 7 keys have some kind of basis in the Luna Nova school's wonders the students are all talking about. So the story continues where you discover 6 of them and then you have all 7 keys, and so the girls realize that they have 7 of them, but didn't learn the truth behind the 7th wonder, which is the ghost girl of the library. So now you figure that out. Okay, now that's figured out, and in reality, Molly McIntyre, a background character since the first film, has been repeating her 3 years of Luna Nova over and over again because she's in an even bigger time loop than Akko's gang. For her, it's been going on for 200 years and she's just fed up with Akko's malarkey, so she spreads all of her chariot cards about the school and dungeons and you've gotta find them. None of it's hard, just really goddamn tedious because it means redoing all of the major dungeons and walking around the Luna Nova campus that we're already mighty fucking familiar with. It kinda seems as though this portion is only here because the developers were unconfident in the length of the main campaign and then misguidedly brought down the overall experience. However, once every card is found, Akko and the gang can face Molly to save her from the curse in a fight that I now realize is pretty tough. I used the mega super move that does a fuck ton of damage and made it out pretty Gucci on the first go around. In the ending, Molly has a heart-to-heart with the whole gang, including Ursula, who joined the loop at one point, and they decide to lock up the chamber for good and continue the series like it never happened, I guess. Yeah, I know this is like the 3rd time I've brought it up, but this taking place between episodes 7 and 8 really does hamper the amount of impact it could have on the characters, with the exception of if a second season happens and chooses to acknowledge it. Chamber of Time isn't particularly a good game. The pacing is slow, the narrative fumbles often, and there's a bit too much grinding involved for many of the side quests. But you know what? I had a pretty damn fun time playing it. I know usually when people talk about shining examples of game adaptations, they'll point to Battle for Bikini Bottom or Dragon Ball FighterZ, which are legitimately good games, and yes, more games should strive for that quality, but sometimes you gotta look at an adaptation as supplementary material for fans. Don't mistake this for some kind of buy thing, wait for next thing to buy sort of statement. There's still anime adaptations that won't even appeal to fans like 90% of jump-based fighters, Afro Samurai 2, or the bottomless stack of quickly made visual novels. I just wanted to shed some light on this very small middle quality area that's made for a very niche audience that you more than likely just don't fall into. Hey everyone, yet again, if you made it this far, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it all the time. I want to give a big special shout out to my friends Ponji and Alex for doing the little voice part earlier in the video. Obviously, I'm a guy with a guy voice. I have issues voicing women. You can check out some of my other videos if you want to. If you didn't like this, you don't have to do that. If you didn't like it, why'd you watch this long? But, you know, be what it be sometimes. Next project, we'll just find out, because when I tell things, I always regret it. Anyways, have a good one.